The Central Division is the most competitive division in the entire league. I'll get into why this is and the backup I have in just a minute. But first, welcome to Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. I'm Amanda, hockey analysis book obsession. You miss 100% of the pages you don't read. This is the 9th episode. Here at Plot Twists and Hat Tricks, the episodes are broken down into 3 segments or periods. The first period is always hockey analysis. Could be about the NHL, could be about the PWHL. You will have to tune in to find out. The second period is where I talk about a book. There are never any spoilers for the book being talked about, like ever. Finally, we have the third period, which, similar to the game of hockey, anything can happen. So I consider it my wild card. And it changes every week. Well, let's lace up those skates and take the ice. The first period is about to start. So this is the first episode that I am pre-recording, and so there is not going to be any news for this episode or for the following 2 episodes. If there is any big breaking news, then I will do my best to record a video for Instagram or for TikTok. So if you're not already following me on social media, you should go ahead and do that. You can follow me on both Instagram and TikTok at PTHTpod. So my surgery, as I mentioned last week, is on my knee. And this is kind of some last minute recording because my surgery got moved from Thursday to Tuesday. So when I had originally planned to record a couple episodes on today, which is Sunday, August 9th, and then record another episode, actually this episode, on the Wednesday before, which was before surgery, which was August 12th, like I normally do, so that I could have some news. Everything has changed, so you gotta love insurance. Anyway, let's talk about the Central Division. So we are going to start with my hometown team, the Colorado Avalanche. So my fun fact for the Colorado Avalanche is that the head coach, Jared Bednar, has been with the team for over a decade, which is unheard of. He has been with the team about as long as John Cooper has been with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He might be a few years shy of him, but this just isn't seen in the league. Typically, we are seeing coaches refreshed every 3 to 5 years. And Bednar is just different. He's loved by both the players and the fans, and I think management sees that. I think management believes in him. I mean, the Avs are still his first NHL job. I mean, he's worked in, I believe, the ECHL and the ACHL, or the ACHL, and the AHL, which is the minor league affiliate to the NHL, and the ECHL is the minor league affiliate to the AHL. So he's definitely been around. He's even been a player. And so seeing him with the same team has been really fun, especially as an Avs fan myself. All right, so I decided that, and I did this specifically for this episode and then the following episode on the Pacific Division, of only choosing 3 notable players. And the reason being is if I did notable players for the Avalanche, I would just end up naming probably 90% of the team. And this is not an Avalanche podcast. This is not an Avalanche focused episode. So I did my best to just choose 3 players. And it was tough, but I think I have a good case for each of the 3 players I chose. So the first player I chose is Nathan MacKinnon. So I have been watching Nathan McKinnon literally since his first NHL game in 2013. I remember him being drafted. I remember watching him in training camp. I remember that was one of the few years I actually watched preseason. And I was there for opening night when his rookie year. And some of my favorite memories, not gonna lie. And I was obsessed with this guy. I mean, a little embarrassing story is that I asked him to prom my senior year of high school. I mean, I got a maybe, so that counts for something, right? But overall, even though McKinnon does have a little bit of, let's say, an interesting personality, he he's really, I just want to go play hockey and I don't want to interact with fans, which is fine. That is totally his prerogative. He has gotten a lot better with that as he's grown a bit, but there's definitely been some times where he knows he's the best player on the team that he could do some extra signings, especially with little kids there and things, but he just chooses not to. And I am viewing it as him protecting his mental health. Well, at the end of the day, he just wants to play hockey. He doesn't care about the politics of the NHL. He doesn't care about the interviews. And I wouldn't say he doesn't care about the fans by any means. I think he legitimately just wants to put on the gear, go play hockey. He wants to, at the end of the night, he wants to go shower and go home, get any treatments he needs. I've had a very interesting perspective with McKinnon. The few times that I've met him, not as an employee of the Avalanche, always super, super nice to me. And although awkward, very awkward, but I think he's grown out of that a little bit. I haven't seen him in several years, but just watching him in interviews, he's definitely become a little less awkward. From working with him, again, he's always been super, super nice to me. I never had any problems with him. If I saw him in the hallways and I said hi, he always said hi back. I have heard from other employees with the Avs and or coworkers with that I had with the Avs that not the nicest to them, but I personally never had a problem with him. And that's not just me being biased because he's my favorite player in the entire league, but also just the interactions I've had with him was always positive. But I do know that there have been some negative interactions, but again, I think he's getting better. The next notable player is Cale Makar. Of course, I have to mention Cale Makar. He is arguably one of the best defensemen, if not the best defenseman in the NHL. And he is part of the reason why the Avalanche are as successful as, well, they are. And the tandem between McKinnon and Cale is great. I I like him a lot as being like the quarterback, so to speak, on our power play. I do wish our power play was a little bit more successful, but I think what is happening, as I mentioned, I believe it was episode 2 when I did a deep dive on, or a little bit deeper of a dive, I should say, of the Avalanche on if they were an overrated team or not. And I think that their power play is not as successful as we'd like it to be and how successful as it should be given the talent because the special teams coaches are just watching their power play performance. They're looking for holes in their power play. They see, oh, they are going for the perfect shot. If they have somebody in front of the net, then they're probably going to score. So we need to stop that from happening. If we keep them outside of the house, they're probably not going to score. And I think that's part of why their power play struggles. But let's go back to talking about Kale. Anyway, so I remember seeing Kale's first game, and I knew he was going to be a superstar when he scored in his first game. And just what a time to be at the game. And he he's definitely one of those players on the team that I think if the Avs ever lost him, if he got traded, the team would crumble. I think we saw early signs of that when he was hurt for the first two games of the Western Conference Finals. I think the Avs very easily could have beaten the Knights, but because they went to Vegas 2 games down, they didn't stand a chance. And then the last player that I have is Gabriel Landeskog. So where he is not the most talented player, I would say, on the Avalanche anymore, he is a absolutely fantastic leader. I can see a difference in how the Avs play now that Landy is back after his injury. And let's just talk about his injury for a minute, because that was inspiring. He did such a risky surgery that no one in the NHL has done before. I believe the only other people who have had this surgery as professional athletes might be basketball players. And basketball is just such a different game than hockey, and you use your knees in such a different way. And I think that Landy going through that surgery and then fighting to come back, it puts him in a different tier. I think that he cares so much about the Avs. I mean, he's been on the team since he was a rookie. He was the youngest player, or the youngest captain for a period of time, I believe, before Connor McDavid took that from him. But Landy he's just unmatched. Even if it's not necessarily from a skill point, I think that it's hard to be out of the league for 2 years. And then when you do come back, you come back in playoffs and you're playing against your division rival in playoffs. I think that is hard. But his last season, as his first full season, I'm impressed. I was one of those people who thought there's no way he comes back from this injury. The surgery is too experimental. It's too intense. There's just no way he comes back. And I was pleasantly surprised when he popped up back on the ice. And I had a feeling he was going to come back for the full season after he was in the 2024-2025 playoffs. I was pleasantly surprised. As I said, I don't think that he is going to be in the league much longer. I would say max 3 years, but I think he can get a lot accomplished. I think with the team that the Avs have right now, I think they could be a cup contender before he retires. And I think if they do get a cup in the next 3 years, Landy retires after that. But we're just going to have to wait and see. It's too early to tell. All right, so the next team that I have is the Dallas Stars. So their fun fact is that they were upset by the Wild in the playoffs, especially since they made it to the Western Conference Finals, I believe the past 3 years prior to this year. Dallas has been the bane of the Avalanche's existence, so I keep a very, very close eye on them. Outside of the Avalanche and the Penguins, they're probably one of the teams that I watch the most because my analyst brain is working of how can we beat them? Where is Ottinger's weak spots? What can we do to be better? The Dallas Stars are all my nightmares, and not in a good way. So who are some notable players? So Mikko Rantanen. I've talked a lot about Mikko Rantanen and how maybe I haven't actually talked necessarily about this part. So Mikko Rantanen ultimately ended up being traded from the Avalanche to go to Carolina several seasons ago now because he thought that he deserved about as much money as Nathan MacKinnon. Even now, I took that awkward pause. Even now, thinking about Miko, he's not not the same caliber of player that McKinnon is. I think Rantanen is a fantastic player. I truly, truly miss him on the Avs. I truly, truly hate playing against him on Dallas, but I don't I don't think he's worth the same amount as Mac is. I think ultimately his contract ended up being very similar to Mac's with Dallas, but I think he's being overpaid, honestly. And where I do want to get into analysis of Miko, I am going to wait until I do a deep dive of the Dallas Stars in the upcoming months. The next notable players is Jason Robertson. This is another player that I want to spend a lot of time talking about, and probably not for why you think. So, as we know, he recently signed a 1 year deal. As we know, Jason Robertson recently signed a 1 year deal with the Stars in order to avoid arbitration. And I think this is very, very significant because 1 year is not a long time. And I think that he might be looking to leave. I think he is giving the Stars 1 more year to see what they can do. And I think if the Stars aren't making it to the finals this year, then I think Robertson leaves. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. And then the last notable player I mentioned earlier was Jake Ottinger, otherwise known as Otter. I love him as a goalie, and I hate playing against him. He has the Avs number, and he knows how to stop all their nifty moves and such. But he is such a reliable goalie. I really, really admire him from a goalie standpoint. I think that he's just absolutely fantastic. Again, just such a reliable player, and that's why he made the notable players list. All right, the next team that I have on the docket is the Minnesota Wild. So their fun fact is that they made it to the second round for the first time in over a decade. I believe the last time they actually made the second round is when they beat the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2014. I very vividly remember this playoff run because Tyson Barrie was injured by Matt Cook in, I believe it was game 5. Game 5. And that took Tyson Barrie out for the series. And then the Avs ended up ultimately losing the series to Minnesota. And I just recently got over that. And now I'm just all mad at Minnesota again. So wonderful memories there. Okay, back on. So some notable players. We have Quinn Hughes, obviously. That was huge news when he went over to Minnesota, I believe in December of 25. So in the 2025-2026 season, I believe he is the reason why they were as competitive as they were in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And he's just such a talented defenseman. I mean, he's just like Kale. The two of them together are just in a league of their own. Next, we have Kirill Kaprizov. Fantastic player. Again, I hate playing against him, but he's a really, really good player. He's so talented. He's great on the power play. You can really put that guy in any situation, and he's going to excel. And then finally, we have Matt Boldy, who very similar to Krill and Quinn. He is just such a standout player for the Wild. Like, when I looked at the Wild roster, it was just no question who my top 3 notable players were going to be for this team. I had no questions at all. And Boldy, such an easy choice. He's such a reliable player. Is where he's always where he needs to be. And it is really great to watch him play. Not to play against him, but it's awesome to watch him play. All right, so the next team that we have is the Utah Mammoth, and they made it to the playoffs for the first time in team history. They are formerly known as the Arizona Coyotes, who are formerly known as the Phoenix Coyotes. And they faced off against Vegas in the first round, and they almost beat them. It was actually crazy. They did this, I want to say, a movement to an extent where if you brought in your old Vegas Knights jersey and put it in their bin, and they did like this special program, it was like a one day only, then I believe you got a free Mammoth jersey. That's insane. Fantastic marketing, a great way to build your fan base. And especially with Utah and Vegas being so close to each other geographically, that was genius. Like, props to their marketing team. I don't know how that looked on the accounting books, but hopefully it wasn't free jerseys. It was just discounted jerseys. But I just remember that happening and sending the article to my boyfriend and being like, damn, I kind of wish I had a Vegas jersey so that I could throw it in a bin and go get a free Mammoth jersey or discounted Mammoth jersey, whichever it turned out to be. Now, if they were to do that for the Avalanche, absolutely no way are you getting any of my Avs jerseys. Nope. No, absolutely not. So, some notable players on the Utah Mammoth are Logan Cooley, Clayton Keller, and Nate Schmidt. So I want to spend some time to talk about Clayton Keller. He has really grown. Watching him on Arizona and then watching them move to Utah, and he essentially gets a fresh start with a new fan base, has been just amazing to watch. Like, he's really grown into his own. And he's extremely competitive. He's really fun to watch. I believe he's the captain of the team. And so he's showing great leadership skills. He's pretty young, so there's still a lot of time for him to continue to improve. But yeah, he's definitely one to watch. And I am just so excited to watch him grow as a player to continue to watch him grow. And then I want to talk a little bit about Nate Schmidt. So Schmidt has been kind of bounced around the league. I've seen him on a lot of different teams, such as Vegas. I've seen him on Florida. Those are the only two teams that are in my mind. Obviously, he was on a team before he was on Vegas, so because he came over in the expansion draft. But he's a solid veteran player. He's a solid veteran presence, and I think he just adds depth to the Mammoth roster. I don't expect him to be in the league longer than the next 5 years. Honestly, I'm expecting him probably more in the 3 to 4 year range, but if he goes past 5 years, I'd be kind of shocked just because of age. But I mean, he's still looking good. He doesn't really have too long of an injury history that I know of. So yeah, I think he's good. And it makes the Mammoth a really fun team to watch. All right, so the next team I have here is the St. Louis Blues. So I would say they have recently had a fall from grace. I remember how competitive of a team they were in the 2022 playoffs against the Avs in the second round. They actually handed the Avs 2 losses. In the entire playoff run, the Avs only lost 4 games during that playoff run. That's insane. They handed half of the losses to them. The other 2 losses came from Tampa Bay in the finals. That means the Avs swept the first and third round. I believe the Blues are currently rebuilding and they have a mountain to climb, especially in the Central Division, because they are, it's hard. It's so competitive in the Central Division. I mean, just listening to some of the players that I've listed off and then just knowing the players that I still haven't included that are in this outline, that's crazy. And next week we'll talk about it more, but the Pacific Division is crazy too. Like the Western Conference is stacked. I would argue that the Western Conference is more competitive and has a better talent pool than the Eastern Conference. That might be a hot take, but I think I think it's true just after doing this little mini deep dive into each team in the league. So I also want to talk about Bennington. He is actually the first player on my notable players list. And I want to talk about him because he he's a very interesting goaltender. Personally, I don't like him, but that is coming from an Avs fan. And if you remember the 2022 playoffs, there was this whole water bottle conspiracy. Well, it wasn't really a conspiracy. Bennington threw a water bottle, or no, Bennington didn't. So Kadri crashed into Bennington, and Bennington threw a water bottle at Kadri during an interview, and it just icky taste in my mouth. I mean, I didn't like Bennington really to begin with, and that was more skill wise, but personality, I was like, dude, you just lost all my respect. He has a tendency, though, to come up in really big games. Like, just looking, he was the starting goalie for Team Canada, and he came up really big for them in those big moments in both the Olympics and Four Nations. In fact, I believe he was one of the main reasons why Team Canada won in the Four Nations a couple of years ago. But overall, I think he's a really, really hot and cold goalie. I personally wouldn't want him on my team. I don't trust him. I think that, and that's not even coming from like a personality standpoint, I just don't trust his skill. Because of his hot and cold tendencies, I don't trust him to not, well, for lack of a better term, fuck something up. So, yeah, lots of feelings on Bennington. Next, I have Cam Fowler. So, I'm not going to lie. I had a hard time coming up with 3 players for St. Louis. And it's not necessarily because out of all the teams in the Central Division, they are probably the team that I watch the least or know the least about. He was just, they don't have a lot of name recognizable players at this moment. Actually, it's kind of funny. When I was doing this research, a lot of the players that I thought were on St. Louis actually turned out to be on the Blue Jackets. So I just misread headlines of players going, I was like, oh man, the Blues are going to be such a good team. And then when I was doing a deep dive for the Columbus Blue Jackets, I was like, oh, they are actually on the Blue Jackets. So that was a little awkward. But Cam Fowler was a very recognizable player name for me. So I expect that he's just going to continue to grow on this team. The last player is Connor McMichael, who is a recent acquisition, and he looks to be a solid second or third line player based off of stats and performance on his previous team, the Washington Capitals. He's also a pretty young player, so he can still be molded into the player that St. Louis needs. Is that going to be enough to make them a playoff contender this year? I don't think so. I think that we're not going to see St. Louis as a contender probably until maybe mid-2030s. I think the league is just that competitive. I think some of the top players in the league need to retire before we can see the Blues make another run. All right, the next team that I've got beef beef with, I'm not going to lie. And it's not the same type of beef that I have with the Dallas Stars. So the Predators over the offseason signed they signed a new president of hockey operations. And why is this important? Why does this matter? Well, he happens to be the former Avs GM. And let me tell you, I was looking at their roster today when I was setting up this outline to look for like three notable players. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, he played for the Avs. He played for the Avs. He used to play for the Avs. He's traveled around a little bit, but he used to play for the Avs. And I'm like, he just went and snagged a bunch of former Avalanche players that might not have been noticed before or might be underestimated. So I think the Preds are going to be sneaky good this year. And as an Avs fan, I don't like it. If I'm looking at it from a Preds standpoint, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, let's go. So who are the notable players that I chose? The first one I chose is Roman Josi. He's a veteran player. I mean, everybody on this list for notable players are veteran players. He is probably one of the more recognizable names on the Predators right now. And he's just solid. I think that I think the Preds should have been a little bit higher on rankings the past several seasons because I think these three players have been very notable, especially Josi. I think that he's well respected on the team. He's well respected around the league, and he can do some pretty crazy stuff. And speaking of crazy stuff, we got to talk about Philip Forsberg. I'm specifically thinking of Philip Forsberg's mustache, and I don't know why that just popped into my head, but I was looking ahead at my next notable player as I was wrapping up Josi and was like, Philip Forsberg has a pretty fantastic mustache. And I don't know why that sticks in my head so much. It has nothing to do with his player abilities. And I know that when he plays the Avalanche, I don't want anything to do with him. Love to watch him when he's not playing the Avs, but when he plays the Avs, like, God damn it. So that's what I have for Forsberg. And finally, I have Ryan O'Reilly. He actually used to play on the Colorado Avalanche and was with McKinnon during his early seasons with the team. He left the Avs and went to the Predators before it was cool. So I'm going to re-record that. So the next player that I have and the last player for our notable players is Ryan O'Reilly. He went from the Avs to the Predators before it was cool. Since then, there's been other players such as Ross Colton and Jack Drury who were recently signed as a result of the Avs GM now working with the Predators. At least that's my suspicion. So I am actually shocked that Ryan O'Reilly still plays in the league. He's hanging on. If this isn't his last season, I don't know when it will be, to be completely honest with you. I remember watching him when I was really, really young. He's actually only one of two players I can think of right now that are exempt from having the visor. And so the visor rule started, I want to say, in the 2013 season. So anybody who was drafted in 2013 onward has to wear a visor. Most players already did, but because of injuries, that visor rule was put into place. And Ryan O'Reilly, having played in the league prior to that, was grandfathered in. So if that doesn't tell you how long he's been in the league, I don't know what will. All right. Next, I have the Winnipeg Jets. I honestly don't know what to say about the Jets right now. They made a shocking move with acquiring Stuart Skinner from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that led to questions about the back end. So I don't really have a fun fact about them right now. I'm just kind of sitting and waiting because I'm honestly so confused on what their plan is. Are they trying to have like a good goalie tandem? Was it just clickbait for Hullabuck to be going to Carolina? Like, what is going on? So many questions, not enough answers, and one of those times where I really wish that I was a fly on the wall. Speaking of notable players, yes, Connor Hullabuck is still there on at, rostered with the Jets. I think he stays. I think if he was going to be traded, he would have been traded already, to be completely honest. I think if he was going to go to Carolina, he would have gone already. And if he does move, I don't know why he's waiting so long to go. I mean, here we are, early August, preseason starts in September. I don't see an August trade happening. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, I think that the team around Hullabuck has some growing to do, and I think he really wants a championship. I think getting that taste of winning a gold medal this year really makes him want to win a cup. And I think I could see him going to a cup contender. I think of the teams that need a goalie, the only cup contender right now is going to be Carolina. And I could see him going there. I mean, I think the Panthers are going to be back in the picture, but they got their goalie situation figured out. I don't see him going to the Kings. I don't think San Jose really needs a goalie. It's hard to picture him anywhere but Winnipeg, but I think we might be seeing that soon. I think that it's going to be more of a midseason trade. I think it will be interesting to see how often he's playing if he is in that starter position. I expect he will be, but I think when we start seeing him sitting out 2, 3, 4 games, then there might be some negotiations going on with another team. Next on my list, I have Mark Shafee. I even practiced that name, guys, and I still couldn't get it right. So he is the captain of the Jets, and I believe he's been there his entire career. So he's very synonymous with the Jets. When I think of the Jets, I'm thinking of him and Hullabuck, to be completely honest. And he's just solid guy. The last player I have for the Winnipeg Jets is Nino Niederreiter. So when I was looking through the roster, kind of similar to a couple previous teams, I wasn't recognizing too many names on the roster. I think that they're rebuilding. I think they're redeveloping. But Niederreiter stood out because he played with both Carolina and Minnesota, both teams that I've definitely been paying attention to in the past several years. I mean, he was playing on Minnesota when they were just a huge rival for the Avs. I mean, that rivalry has since been reborn, but I think that's why I recognize his name. Solid player, hate to play against him, so I think he'll be good on the Jets, and I think he's going to give them a good shot this year. All right. Our final team is the Chicago Blackhawks. So the Blackhawks have been in a rebuild since Kane left for the Rangers and Taves went on a break from hockey for health reasons. Kane was actually traded mid-season and was traded the same season that Bedard was drafted. So I believe that, I don't know why I'm blanking on this right now, but so Kane was traded mid-season. So he was traded pretty close to the trade deadline in 2023. And I think he saw maybe blood in the water and not really wanting to play with the Blackhawks. They were really, really struggling at that time. I mean, they still are to an extent. But that was the same year that Connor Bedard was drafted. So Connor Bedard was drafted in 2023. So that would have been after Kane's departure. But the Blackhawks haven't really been competitive since the 2010s. But now with Kane's new experience being on different teams and now holding more of a mentor position, I'm interested to see if the Blackhawks become more competitive. Do I think they are a cup contender in the next 2 years with Kane's contract? No. But I think they do become more competitive. And I think maybe 5 years from now, we see them as a playoff contender. But I don't think we see it while Kane is still in the league, expecting that he retires probably at the end of this contract. So he retires a Blackhawk. So who are the notable players? Well, I've mentioned two of them already in Connor Bedard and Patrick Kane. Connor Bedard is notable because even though I give him so much sass, he's still growing. He's still young in the league. He's going to get there, I think. I still think he's overrated to an extent. And I think that's just from early advertising. I know that I've heard some backlash on social media that, oh, well, of course he wasn't compared to those other players when he was first drafted. And I was like, he was. I don't know why that stuck so much in my head. I think probably because he was being compared to Crosby. But since that's happened, I have not noticed these young players being compared to players that are already in the league. I think that trend has ended, and I think that's going to be better and put less pressure on players to perform to this super high level when they're still getting used to the league. I think Connor being out for the first few months of the season is going to be tough. I think, especially with it being a shoulder injury, speaking from experience, shoulder injuries are so hard to come back from. So he might pick it up towards the end of the season, but I think he's going to really use Patrick Kane as a mentor, and I think that's how he's going to grow the most this season. And I don't think we're necessarily going to see it in his play this year. We might see it next year. So I want to talk a little bit about the return of Patrick Kane and why this is significant. So Patrick Kane was arguably one of the best players to have ever played for the Blackhawks. I mean, in the 2010s when he was playing with Jonathan Tavares, that duo was just unmatched. Like, everybody wanted to be like them. They were so skilled. Everybody hated playing against the Blackhawks. It's probably a very similar feeling to teams playing the Avs or teams playing Dallas or even Vegas. So where I don't think Patrick Kane is in that role anymore, I think he's more in that veteran role. I think it was actually good for him to go spend some time playing in New York, go spend some time in Detroit. I think he got to learn the game better, see different perspectives, play with different players, and just really learn about other team identities. So I think that he's going to take all of that knowledge and share it with this new young team. And the last player I have is Bowen Byram. And as I mentioned, when he left Buffalo to come to Chicago, I'm shocked. I'm still a little shocked. I think that I don't know if he's ready to be a top defenseman. I don't know if he is a top defenseman. I think that he's definitely either going to sink or swim on the Blackhawks. I think if he does not perform at the level they're expecting, that he sinks. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes for him, but he's definitely a notable player, especially after his performance in the playoffs this year. All right, so hopefully now you can see why the Central Division is so competitive. Like I said, it was really hard to narrow it down to just 3 players and not just nerd out the entire time. I mean, just looking at my timer right now, before any edits, I'm at like 46 minutes. So I definitely rambled, definitely shared probably too many stories, but that's the fun of podcasting. And I'm the host and the editor, so I get to make those decisions. So, with that being said, let's change it up and chat about the first book in the Cat and Mouse duology by H.D. Carlton. All right, so the first book in the Cat and Mouse duology is called Haunting Adeline. And as mentioned, this is by H.D. Carlton. So, what is the plot of this book? Well, a woman is stalked and falls in love with a man that she doesn't realize is stalking her. And at some point, she does figure it out, and then she has some feelings about that. But remember, this is dark romance, so of course she's going to of course she is going to accept it. How did I consume this? This was an eyeball read for me. And why should you read this book? It is dark. Yes, it's pretty dark. And it is taboo. It has some taboo subjects. But with it being in a dual point of view, it made it a very interesting read, especially because you were seeing it from different perspectives. Like, for example, the male main character or the stalker is Zaid, and kind of seeing his perspective of why he was doing the stalking was interesting. And then to see Adeline fall in love with him, and then to have that like internal debate of should she be with him? I mean, he's stalking her. Obviously, with a romance, we're going to have a different perspective of that. Like, we kind of know that she's going to accept it, like I mentioned. But I think the case that Carlton did was absolutely fantastic. And I don't think I could shout this from the rooftops enough. H.D. Carlton just crushed this series. I mean, how she wrote it, I think you're going to actually end up liking it more than you think. So don't necessarily let the trigger warnings that I am about to read or the content of it being a dark romance focusing on the stalker romance part of it deter you from checking this book out, because I think it's worth giving it a shot. It is not everybody's cup of tea, and I totally get that. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be my cup of tea, to be completely honest with you. And I ended up really liking this book. I don't know what that says about me, but it turned out to be better than I expected. I can see the hype around it. As I'll cover next week, Hunting Adeline rather, is a completely different ball game. So where I really, really liked Haunting Adeline, and that cliffhanger just unmatched. It was really good. And with that, we're going to read the trigger warnings directly from Haunting Adeline. Important note: none of these conspiracies derive from anti-Semitism or QAnon, but from my own demented imagination, common conspiracies in the media, and many opulent horror movies my dad used to watch growing up. This book ends on a cliffhanger. The contents are very dark, with triggering situations, such as a non-dub con between the main characters, graphic violence, human trafficking I would say that's more mentionings of human trafficking. Stalking, child trafficking, again, more mentions. You're not in a POV of this. Child sacrifice, mentions of child death, and explicit sexual situations. And that's an understatement. There are also particular kinks such as gunplay, somnophilia, bondage, and degradation. This book was previously taken down due to the warning, but you can also find them in reviews on my website, or feel free to message me directly. Your mental health matters. So I think your mental health matters is one of the most powerful lines in that trigger warning, and probably the reason why I actually read it. Because we saw that in Daggermouth. I currently am seeing it in my current read of Book of Sin by H.M. Wolf. So authors are definitely starting to bring that in. But dark romance can really, really mess with your health. So why would I recommend reading this book? Well, when I read this book about a year or two ago, I was really interested, and still am, in conspiracy theories. And before that trigger warning, I did not know this book had anything to do with the conspiracy theory of QAnon. I actually did my master's thesis with QAnon in it, so I could just nerd out about it, but I will save you guys. And I could definitely see the influence of QAnon in this book, and I think that is what kept the page turning for me. But that's just me. And my 9 to 5 is a tech job, so that kind of checks out for why I'm interested in QAnon. My master's thesis, like I said, had QAnon in it, and it was actually on hacktivism. And because of this background, I found that it was just interesting background knowledge to see what her demented thoughts, as she said, were, and where those demented thoughts came from, and then how they've since become conspiracy theories. Like I said, this book is very dark. And was I ever uncomfortable at some parts of it? Absolutely. But this one in particular, I would read again. As I mentioned, the next episode, I'm going to be covering Hunting Adeline, and I will mention it in that episode as well, but that one is probably not one that I would reread, to be honest. I think that Hunting Adeline is it's in a completely different tier than Haunting. It is so much darker, and Haunting Adeline is definitely more stalker romance-esque, very similar to Lights Out, not as funny. It's a lot more serious, but let me tell you, like I mentioned in the Lights Out episode, Lights Out gave me a false sense of security if I could handle dark romance. And I can in the right circumstances, but definitely have to be in the right headspace. With that being said, there were times in this book where I thought of not only DNFing it because I was unsure I could handle the darkness, but because I did feel uncomfortable. I hadn't experienced in my reading journey of feeling so uncomfortable reading a book. It actually ended up turning into a book that I would only read when I was with my boyfriend. We didn't live together at the time, and I would read lighter books on the side or something funny on the side. I wasn't bringing it into my bedroom. I wasn't reading it at night. And as mentioned in that trigger warning, there is an epic cliffhanger. And I remember reading the trigger warning for the first time, and it's saying, oh, this book ends on a cliffhanger. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I read many a books that have ended on a cliffhanger, and they're not as extreme as it's probably not, or rather, when I read in the trigger warning that this book ended on a cliffhanger, I was like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah, a lot of books leave on a cliffhanger. I'm sure you're just being dramatic and you're just using it so that people will read through the whole book to see what happens, to see how intense this cliffhanger was. I can attest that that cliffhanger was crazy. I was lucky enough to be able to just download Hunting Adeline right onto my Kindle within minutes of finishing Haunting Adeline. But man, for those people who had to wait between books, that must have sucked. I mean, I guess I'm kind of going through that right now with the Empyrean series, but I'll get into that later. So another reason why I read it was because, or read this book and actually read this series, was because I was wanting to fit in with a certain group of people. And where I am in a better mindset now to read the book, I don't think that I was at the time. I think that I was trying to be someone I wasn't, to be completely honest with you. And frankly, stalker romances can be really tough to read, especially if you've experienced a stalker on really any level. And so I would caution reading this book because of its dark themes. It is very heavy in stalking. Take those trigger warnings seriously. I'm telling you, it actually brought up some fears that I had ultimately ended up burying pretty deep, that I'm lucky enough to be in such a safe relationship now that I can talk about it. Maybe someday I will tell you guys why, what those triggers were, what it is, some of the things that happened. But today's not that day, so you guys are not lucky enough. Maybe next time. All right, so that book is pretty dark. And where I wouldn't say that it's the darkest book that I'll ever cover in this podcast, it's probably one of them. If you want darker, just wait till next week. But until then, let's talk about why I think dark romance is so popular. And please keep in mind, this is just my opinion. And I do look forward to hearing from you about why you do or do not like dark romance. One of the reasons why I think dark romance is so popular is because it does cover taboo topics, such as stalking, murder, but making it fun, non-consensual sex where the consent is kind of implied. That's more of a reference to The Ritual, which I don't think I'm ever going to cover on this podcast. That book was extremely triggering for me, and I don't, with how, even though I keep it fairly surface level in these episodes and just kind of skim over it and I don't really go into spoiler territory, I don't think I could cover that book. So but I think that's one of the reasons why they're so popular. I think that readers feel safer to read about the topics that they might not be wanting to talk about. And maybe they've even had like similar thoughts or fantasies. And the books are allowing you to explore those fantasies in a safe way where nothing is actually happening to you. And there's some thoughts that I have on it. I know that one of the reasons why The Ritual was just not for me and why I didn't, where I normally do try to finish series, I was just like, absolutely no way, I'm not reading the rest of the series, is because of the content of it. I think that it highlighted some of my worst fears. It felt too dark. Now, for some people, the cat and mouse duology is too dark, which is totally understandable. If you're looking for like a stalker romance but is not as dark, Lights Out is probably the book for you, to be honest. But even with that, it has some dark themes and it can be tough to read. Dark romance is not for everybody. And where I am, ironically, writing like this dark romance dystopian right now, I am also a little concerned of the things that come out of my brain. So I'm actually interested that if I do ever publish, what I do end up cutting out because of wanting to save face and such like that. But there's definitely an audience for this, and I think it's because of those taboo topics that people are so interested in it. I think that like the stalker romances, if we're using that for example, is it's scary relatable in a way where I don't think it is as common to have long-term stalkers. I mean, I think speaking as a woman and assuming that women are listening, we've all met that creepy guy in a bar. And I think that Haunting Adeline just takes a step further of what if it wasn't just that one time you met him at a bar, or it wasn't just that one time you saw him at a carnival, or it wasn't that one time, just that one time you saw him at a hockey game and he just kept randomly popping into your life. And where most women don't experience that, thank God, or at least hopefully, I'm hoping that I'm not messing up that statistic. I think it's just interesting to read it. And I think it has so much interest because people are like, oh, this isn't happening to me. This is just a book. I can put the book down and I can go live my normal life and not have to experience it. And I think it's the experience and when the books feel so real is what actually is making them scary. And let me tell you, H.D. Carlton, she's really good at doing that. All right, my friends, thank you so much for turning into this week's episode of Plot Twist and Hat Tricks. Since we are a brand new rookie podcast, please rate 5 stars and leave a nice review as it helps other hockey lovers and book enthusiasts find me. I am active on social media. Find me on TikTok and Instagram at PTHTpod or email me at pthtpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your ideas and thoughts for future episodes. Until then, remember, you miss 100% of the pages you never read and the shots you never take. Bye, guys.